You are listening to the Why Smart Women podcast, the podcast that helps smart women work out why we repeatedly make the wrong decisions and how to make better ones. From relationships, career choices, finances, to faux fur jackets and kale smoothies. Every moment of every day, we're making decisions. Let's make them good ones. I'm your host, Annie McCubbin, and as a woman of a certain age, I've made my own share of really bad decisions. Not my husband. I don't mean him, though. I did go through some shockers to find him. And I wish this podcast had been around to save me from myself. This podcast will give you insights into the working of your own brain, which will blow your mind. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording, and you are listening on this day. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Well, hello, smart women, and welcome back to the Why Smart Women podcast. Today, I'm podcasting from the Northern Beaches in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. However, last week I presented a talk on scams at a skeptical conference in Victoria. To our overseas listeners, that's a state that's not New South Wales and really isn't as nice. So sorry to the Snarky Gherkin. At the end of it, one of the audience members asked me if I thought scamming was getting better or worse. So in some areas, our efforts to curb scamming or lies, as I like to call it, are improving. In other areas, it remains a social nightmare. So as a case in point, this happened to me yesterday. I was having my hair done when I mentioned my daughter was going to Europe for holidays. The hairdresser paused in her hair ministrations. "Oh my God," she said, "I would never go there." Stupidly, I said, "Why?" "Well," she said, "the Muslims are killing people on the streets. Everyone's moving from Scotland to Poland. They're killing people and spitting on them. You know, it's because of the war." I furrowed my brow. She was halfway through my blow dry at this point, and I'm telling you, she's good with a brush and a dryer. And I was very close to looking Hollywood fabulous and didn't want to distract her by screaming, "What in God's name are you talking about? The Scots are being forced to emigrate to Poland due to murderous spitting Muslims, and also what war?" So I didn't do that. I looked calmly at her in the mirror and said, "What are you saying?" At which point she repeated the narrative and in addition paused in the drying, whipped out her phone and offered to show me the YouTube videos which proved her point. I looked down at the clip and back up at her in the mirror and said, No, that doesn't prove anything." She furrowed her brow. "You see," I said, "I could film the angry white teenagers terrorising Woolies shoppers in the plaza over the road, but that wouldn't prove that that was a nationwide issue." She looked at me with pity. "It is real," she said. "It is. I'll never get on a plane again." So I'm telling this story to you listeners as an introduction to my next three guests, who I'm hoping will turn into a regular segment. I'm calling the segment "The Tradie, the Footballer, the Actor, and the Gherkin Walk into a Bar." I think it has a real ring to it. So what's the relevancy of my hairdressing incident and my next guests? Well, all of them spend a large portion of their busy lives fighting disinformation, opening themselves up to ridicule, hate, and worst of all, stupidity. So, good morning to Martin Bella.
Good day, Annie.
Hello, and welcome to the Why Smart Women podcast. Morning, Dane.
Hi, how you going, guys? Thanks for having me.
How do I pronounce you? Is it Pratsky?
Pratsky, that's correct.
So good morning to Dane Pratsky. Welcome.
Thank you.
And good morning to everyone's favourite Gherkin. Hello, Snarky.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
I know, it's amazing. I have had you back, isn't it, really, considering
That's
how we
it.
went. Yeah. Anyway.
Just to follow up on your opener joke there, the all walking into a bar, the barman then said, "Is this some sort of joke?" Sorry, just you can cut that out.
No, I liked it. I'm going to keep it. So my question to you, gentlemen, is, considering the tsunami of misinformation and worse, disinformation that slams into us minute by minute, what got you started? And are there days when you wished you lived on an island only populated by other rational people? Anybody can answer. What got you started? Why do you do it? Because it's a difficult platform that we exist on, is it not?
Who are you going to take the lead on that one, boys?
Go on, Martin.
All right. I've always sort of been a bit reactionary to things. I value, and I was introduced as a footballer, but I was also a physiotherapist. Just because you play football doesn't mean you're dumb. So I've always been capable of doing dumb stuff, but just lately it's just been overwhelming. And as I've said before, like nature abhors a vacuum, and currently, unless we get in there and fill that vacuum, that disinformation is going to fill it. And anyone that walks into that space is only going to hear one thing, and that thing is wrong. So, I'm only a small cog in hopefully what becomes a big wheel. I jumped in and, I try and put facts forward. Savage with some people that reply because they reply through, this emotive crap. If you have a fact-based argument, fine, but don't come on with that crap, because there's a whole lot of people out there who are too nice. They're just good people and they're feeling isolated. So it's about time, some of us that can get out there and do a bit of punch and get out and do it for them.
Yeah. And as we know, unfortunately, once a lie has been perpetrated, the refutation, it's very, very difficult for that refutation to actually hit the frame. We're very, very limbic system driven. So we think we're making rational decisions, but in fact, we're driven by this limbic system, the lizard brain, and then we post-rationalize. So I think for all of us, the fact that we have stuck our head up against the parapet, it's important, but it's tricky. Would you agree with that, Dane?
Absolutely. It can be quite brutal sometimes. I've come across at some points where I've had death threats. It's got really quite serious because I'm in the energy space. I really look at energy as a whole, and especially cheap, clean renewables.
So that's your area, correct?
Generally, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got involved because of the offshore wind projects that were happening in the Hunter. So I noticed the same playbook that I saw happening in Queensland. So, and it ended up being, I was right, Advance had their spokesperson living in the tea gardens, and they were whipping up this fear. And then also behind the scenes, I received a few little letters and notes proving that Barnaby Joyce was sending out thank you letters to the people pushing back against this.
Okay, so two things for our overseas listeners. Barnaby Joyce is he's a sort of a caricature of a human being. I don't know quite how to describe him, but he's sort of moved from one party into another party it's called One Nation, but we call it One Neurone. So that's Barnaby Joyce. And can you explain what you mean by Advance? Who are Advance?
So Advance is it's a right-wing think tank, so to speak, but it's more like a right-wing propaganda machine that has been pushing the fossil fuel talking points that's taken from somewhere like the Homeland Institute in the US. So it's brought that right on shore to Australia because they've watched what's happened in the US with the Trump administration and with these, what would you call them, astroturfing groups. And now they've implemented that same playbook here in Australia, and it's happening right in front of our eyes.
So is this around the fact that wind energy causes neurological issues, and is it that sort of stuff as well?
Absolutely.
Lunacy stuff, yeah.
And it's quite funny with that. There was a really good study done on that, and that's a uniquely an Australian problem because it doesn't happen anywhere else around the world. And it seemed to happen with a small group of people, and then it sort of grew from there. But it's a uniquely Australian problem because obviously in Europe they're well advanced in wind turbines providing cheap clean energy, but here for some reason it causes all these
it's
apparent health injuries.
People's cognition just goes down the toilet as soon as they look at one, right?
They do, and it's about emotion. And it's about change, and people do not like change. They like to sit in this little bubble that they've lived in for decades, or depending on what generation you are, and they're happy to stay there, and it's because it's comfortable, and it's this change. And we saw this through COVID, where we had this huge change. We had changing information that came, sometimes daily. And it's like, but that's not what they told me yesterday.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
but that's what they know today. That's how science works. It develops.
And then we go, why is everyone flip-flopping? When actually they're not flip-flopping. They're just taking in new information and putting out new data, correct?
Absolutely. And let's get it straight. Renewables aren't perfect.
No.
Let's not lie to ourselves. But the old system we're leaving behind is far worse.
Yeah.
And you can have these correlations and causations that come along in Australia, especially with rising electricity prices. And what's changing? The energy grid. Well, that must be to blame. They don't see the nuances of the war in Ukraine, volatile resource prices, breakdowns of coal-fired power stations that were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They don't see that. They just see renewables, bad. I've been told it's bad by these guys, and I believe them because that's emotionally makes me feel safe. That's where I want to be.
It's all emotional. And what do you think about that, Snarky, that issue? Because we've talked about it quite extensively, that people really dislike change, do they not?
They do. Just to add to Dane's point as well, there's an interesting correlation as well in terms of medical misinformation in countries that don't speak English, even Western countries that don't speak English. The medical misinformation ecosystem isn't as prevalent in those countries if you compare it to Germany and France and things. So it's almost like a lot of the noise coming out of the US, where I think a lot of it does emanate, it doesn't quite translate in the same way. And so even though they're getting the same vaccines from the same pharmaceutical companies, for example, they're not having the same level of self-reported,
vaccine injuries.
Yeah, just as an example. So and it's interesting why you would think, even though it's different language, it should just translate across different populations, but with the same rollouts.
But it doesn't, right?
Doesn't appear to be the same. They've got the same reporting mechanisms and things, but But I do feel sometimes a lot of medical misinformation, climate misinformation, political misinformation, a lot of it has similar threads, comes from similar think tanks, and it's fascinating to see how the same strategies are deployed in different areas.
You're saying in a third world country that you're not going to have those same issues?
Well, even in a first world country, so compare it to, say, France or Belgium, for example, high vaccination rates, but they don't have the same level of self-reported symptoms or injuries, quote unquote, as they would call them.
Yeah, vaccine injuries.
And I'm not denying that it is a thing. Like, there are negative.
It's pretty rare,
impacts
right?
of some. It's extremely rare. But it is interesting to see the correlations there across different segments of sharing information.
Well, then we're in the land of the power of an anecdote over data. And as we know, unfortunately, one anti-vaxxer's story of, Aunt Kathy that, died 22 seconds after having her vaccine is going to have way more impact on listeners' brains than a whole tranche of data, right?
Yeah, well, it's the same. A wind turbine, since I've been hearing a strange ring in my ears since, a wind turbine was put up 10 kilometres away.
I can barely think. Go on. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, what do we think? Do we think that, because, you often hear, why should, actors or sports people or just the average Joe, why should we have an opinion? Why should we be out there propagating our ideas? Do we actually have the right to do that? Because you hear this all the time. What does an actor know? Yeah. Go, Martin.
See, this is the problem. First of all, it's the labelling. Now, I can never escape the fact that I'm a footballer, or was. The whole time I was a footballer, I was a father, I was working, I was studying. I was a physio for longer than I played professional football, and yet I'm a footballer, not a physio. And I was as good at physio as I was at football. What happens is people will look at whatever they can to discredit you if your opinion doesn't agree with theirs. Now, the problem is you get dumb people and you also get a lot of lazy people. So when I'm in an argument with someone and I'm pretty mercurial at times, I'll arc up and I'll say things that I shouldn't. and I won't accept something. But after that argument, consistently, I will go back and check up because, one, it reinforces my facts, and two, it gives me material for the next time I have that argument. So I've had 62 years to gather experience in education. I value the countless hours I have spent. Okay, I spent a lot training for football, but I've spent as many and more hours in studying and trying to improve the function of my intellect. And I am not the only one. So just because you are something doesn't mean you can't be something else.
That's right.
And the other thing is simply everyone has a voice. Everyone has a right, I believe, to an opinion. But if you don't have that opinion based in fact, be ready to get it thrown back at you. That simply is my take on the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Dane?
Look, I think Martin pushed on something really important there, and that's how facts can change, and you've got to go back and always double check. So if you were to go, say, 2 years ago, China's emissions were rising. Well, they've actually turned a point now in the last 18 months and they're falling, and their emissions, and this is the first time ever, India's the same, but they're still building more coal-fired power stations. Now, obviously, there's nuance behind that. They're actually being paid to have the capacity now, not run times. So that's why they're madly building, they're gaming the system, basically. They're madly building coal-fired power stations that are not going to be used, but they're paid on their capacity availability. But people don't know that nuance. So when I saw that the emissions were dropping, I'm like, well, why are they building coal-fired power stations? And it wasn't until a gentleman commented in my comment section that gave me that information. So then I went and researched it, and sure enough, he's right. And I learned, this is new information I learned yesterday.
Right.
So you've got to continually update. And I think Martin's really good at that, how I look at his comment sections, I delve into them, and some of them I just love his blunt, like, you're just full of it. And I'm
liking that too.
I do. It's important to put people back in their place without humiliating them. But sometimes I generally give people a little bit more leeway than Martin does, and that's just my style. But that's not saying Martin's is wrong. I get to live my life sometimes out through Martin's comment section. So I would love to just rip them, but that's not the way I do it. But, I think it's really important to always go back, check your facts. And we saw that through COVID. Things change day to day, what they knew yesterday. But it also didn't help that throughout COVID, they did lie to try, I think the mask things, and don't quote me on this, I think there was a shortage of masks, so they said, oh, don't wear masks. But then people can't accept that. I know if they said there's a shortage of masks, tell you what I would have done, went and bought masks.
Yeah.
Right? Because I want to save my wife, my daughter, and my friends and my family.
Sorry, Martin, what were you going to say?
I'd like to cut in there and look, I don't want to sound like we're sort of in a mutual admiration club, but Dane is absolutely right. You've got to, I know I said it, but you've got to, when I was treating people, you apply, so you assess, you apply, and you reassess. And then you go through that process all the time. It is and I always talk about the difference between, an intellectual decision or ritual. The ritual is when you do something and you don't know why, because we've always done it that way.
Yep. 100%.
And it went right through the whole COVID thing. People demanding ritual. Why don't we still do this? Why you said this yesterday and you're not saying it today? We had a new disease. We did not know its ramifications. We didn't know. So you hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Yeah.
And it was continually evolving. No one knows everything right from the jump.
No.
So do they want us just within, and current events show it, people want an answer the day after it happens, Bondi, and then
100%.
they're not willing to wait. Yeah, they're not willing to wait. And then when they do get something, they're not happy with it because it's not dead right.
And I think also
we're very, very
prone to black and white thinking. You know, we're very, very prone to in-group, out-group bias.
It's easy that way. You can be lazy. You can be intellectually lazy
100%.
without applying
That's right.
any sort of critical thinking to your own thought processes.
And that's the thing.
I do it all the time. I do it all the time. Correct.
We all need to be applying metacognition, which is thinking about your thinking. Now, people don't like that notion. They just want to get into this very simplistic black and white thinking, in-group bias, out-group bias, and broad brushstroke thinking, which is back to your point, Martin, about, you know, you're a footballer. So, you know, we use heuristics. We use mental shortcuts. Footballer, dumb, can't think to himself, what are you doing in the public sphere making commentary, as opposed to footballer, physiotherapist, father, activist. You've got all these cats, but we don't want that. We want things, people want things to be simple. And Snarky and I have talked about it a lot, that the wellness industry, Snarks, is interesting in point because people go to the doctor if they've got something wrong with them, and the doctor goes, oh, I'm going to run some tests and let's see. I'm not sure what it is. You know, it could be this, it could be that. You go to a wellness practitioner and they go, oh, I know what that is. That's adrenal fatigue. You've got adrenal fatigue, which is a fucking made up thing, but apparently everybody's got it and you can take this supplement and you're going to feel better. That's right, isn't it, Snarks?
And all you have to do is sign up to this newsletter here, and it costs $19.95 a week, and you will be the best ever.
I think we oh, sorry.
I did a study when I was still a physio about physio, because I worked on spending 99% of my time on being good at 99% of presentations. And the other 1% was to merely recognise it was something that I did not recognise and know who to send them to. But they did a study and they found that physios that went and did further studies on specific things were far more likely to diagnose that particular issue as a problem than the average physio. Now, the question is, were they more able to diagnose it or were they more likely to diagnose it? And that's the issue with your wellness mobs. When your field of real knowledge is limited, what are you going to diagnose? Are you going to say that's outside my range and lose possible revenue? Or are you going to say, I know exactly what that is, boom, boom. I don't think I ever knew exactly what it was.
No.
Because everything else feeds into it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Snarks.
No, just touching on a point there, I did found an interesting correlation a few days ago around, and it's going to sound a bit zany, but there was this interesting correlation between the cultural phenomenon of UFO sightings since the 1950s, and the same with a lot of self-reported sort of medical issues. And so as the culture changes, say with the UFO situation back in the 1950s, you know, they had metal arms and they'd be like an octopus and big teeth, and like when you look at the descriptions of the aliens back then. And then as the culture changes, so do the descriptions of the aliens as well. And so it's almost like a metaphor for, or it's just like an exaggeration of the culture of the time. So, you know, in the 90s, X-Files kicking off, suddenly, you know, it changes to Little Greys and all this sort of thing. It sounds bizarre, but I'm getting somewhere with it. When you look at the VARS reporting in the US, which is the self-reporting for various injuries, like back in 2022, when myocarditis was in the zeitgeist, reports of it absolutely shot up. There's hardly any reports of it now. I mean, it was a thing before the pandemic.
Interest in it. Yeah,
it's still a thing now, but they've shifted as the media has shifted, or
no, they've shifted to turbo cancer.
So
haven't they?
Even that's dying off. Even that's dying off now because it's now gene therapy is the latest one. And so when you look at the reports, I mean, they still trickle along, but they change as the culture changes. And so it's that, touching on Martin's point, the more something is explored and spoken about by their favorite wellness guru and things, people will then be convinced, oh shit, that's what I've got. And it's the same, the more they're watching, you know, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, And they'll report.
Exactly.
So it's a weird analogy. It's
no, it's
probably too much
accurate.
coffee. Yeah,
I think it's human nature for everyone to want answers.
It
and
is. And certainty.
we're storytellers too. We're
certainty
storytellers.
is a beautiful thing to have in life. I love to have the certainty of owning a home, or I don't, but the bank does. But I love to have the certainty of having the bank own my home, and and to come back to that every single day, and to be bled, weekly by the bank. I'm good with that certainty, but it's when the interest rates rise that certainty is taken away. So who am I looking to blame? The government's spending too much money. It's them. It's their fault.
Better find out.
But Dane,
Yep.
How enticing would it be to watch a certain YouTube channel that can sell you a laminated pamphlet that tells you that the banks, you don't actually have to pay the banks your mortgage, and they're non-constitutional because you're a maritime creature, and everything's like that. And there are literally groups out there that tell you that you don't need to pay loans and you don't need to do all these things.
Are you referring to sovereign citizens?
Yeah, the whole
I love
thing.
them.
I know I've corralled right off the cliff there, but
let's do soft sits.
Well, I was hoping that was going to come with a powder.
I don't love them. I said years ago that they were going to become a problem, and
they are a big
and
problem.
they have. Like we had the shooting up there at Bowen, sovereign citizen. Yeah. Shooting down there at Williambilla, they're all the same thing. What is interesting, though, it's probably a little bit of a step back, is, you were talking about Dane and then Snarks. It's funny, but when good things happen, people like to internalise the impetus for it. That was me.
That's right.
Even when they win at the pokies, that was the way I pushed the button or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
But when they lose or when it's a bad thing, they look for someone to blame.
100%.
And you will see that everywhere. You see it in kids, what did you do that for? Oh, no, it wasn't me, it was her.
Exactly.
It was my sister.
Exactly.
We haven't changed.
No, we haven't.
But sovereign citizens go at that because, there's a lot there.
Now, sovereign citizens, and I think, who was I talking to? Was it you, Martin? We were talking, Dan, can't remember, that, we're so obsessed at the moment. I hearken back to the hairdresser saying that she couldn't go to Europe because of the dangers from all the Muslims. We're so obsessed now with that, and it's confirmation bias. So what we know our brains do is we just cherry pick the environment and just pick out what it is, that the facts that we want in order to support what we already believe. So they're on our focus. But of course, the biggest problem that we have at the moment is white, is it not? Is the sovereign citizens.
White males are more likely to, like we've seen, as Martin just said, we've had the sovereign citizens, we've had Desi Freeman, he's killed 2 police officers, then we had the Train brothers kill 4 police officers in Williambilla, and then I'm not sure what happened in Bowen, but obviously something happened in Bowen again.
Happened.
Yeah, it's pretty much a sovereign citizen, shot 4, killed 3, a family, just had full intention, brought them out to the boundary of the property he had with them. There was cattle stealing and that going on, brought them out, respectable family, and shot all 4. Just boom, boom, boom.
But all of a sudden...
Can you unpack that, Martin? Where did that happen again? Can you unpack that? Because
inland from Bowen.
Where's Bowen?
North of Mackay. It sort of sits roughly...
So it's North Queensland.
Dead centre between Townsville and Mackay. Now, this bloke... and what you'll find... Sorry?
I'm just telling our overseas visitors, it's above New South Wales. It's in Queensland.
Yeah. What you find is most of these characters actually have had run-ins with the law, as had this character, and what they do is they try to legitimise their bad behaviour by saying that they're not actually under that law.
Under the law, yeah.
But the sovereign citizen thing, and the latest, you'll find it, I've been upbraided many times for calling them sovereign citizens. What they are also is wonderful hair splitters. I don't care if we call them pink, fluffy unicorns. They are what they are, and they are dangerous. I say that unreservedly.
Yeah. Snarky, do you want to just unpack the notion of what sovereign citizens believe? Because their belief system is truly astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, you've spoken to people in the past who have far more versed in this world than myself. But the short version of a long story, and I'm purposely going to paraphrase here to annoy the few that might tune in and listen. But essentially, it's just a parallel existence in some regard. Like they don't think that the law applies to them. They don't think that there's all this. They revert back to the Magna Carta in medieval England and reference that. And it's just apparently even soft-civ though isn't the right term for them, but it that's just what everybody knows them as. I'd probably recommend there's some really good content out there by so many creators, but Tom Tanuki has done some really long form deep dives. I would strongly recommend, I don't know him personally, but I'd strongly recommend, I'll send you a link on some bits and pieces, listening to some of his content. He just goes right into them. What's quite fascinating as well, though, have a friend in the US whose mum is a SOV citizen in the US, and it's quite interesting how the Australian SOV-civs deviate from the US SOV-civs, and there's some weird parallels there that don't make any sense. But it's interesting. But there's a few YouTube channels that keep popping up on. I think it's Know Your Rights is one of them as well. I mean, that's very that they wouldn't revert to themselves as SOV-civs, but it's very much, you can buy their pamphlets they'll tell you how to get out of speeding fines and tell you how you don't need to, like I just touched on earlier, you don't need to pay your mortgage and, the bank secrets and all this sort of stuff. And it's just, but it's, I think it starts off as a bit of a club for some people. It's interesting. It's pseudo legal sort of chats. They'll talk about case law and it all feels very smart and things, but there hasn't been
That's right.
That's it. There hasn't been a single case in Australia where a SOV-civ argument has ever got up when they try and reference,
of course not,
various different pieces. But
and
it is. Yeah.
I guess it's fury and you're furious, you feel disenfranchised, you feel marginalised, and then you go beep, 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 and you land on this and it's like, yes, I actually do have some power. Yep.
Yeah, they've made their own reality as well to some degree. I mean, the response in the wake of the Desi Freeman shooting was astonishing, and it still is. Well, it was almost two camps. Some went into the camp, oh no, this is just a false flag, just to demonise SOV citizens. Then there was another camp that says, well, he's not really a SOV citizen because he didn't do X, Y, Z. But then we've sort of now landed on that he's a hero, and it's bizarre.
It's terrifying.
I saw some comments the other day
They've
about
turned him into a Ned Kelly, right? And it's such bullshit.
Pauline Hanson should bring him into One Nation, give him diplomatic immunity, and I reckon everyone would vote for him if he was in one. And it's absolutely sickening. But this is what I think to some degree, when we're combating misinformation, doesn't matter what it's about. I feel like it's pushing back against that extreme ecosystem.
How do you, just let me ask you, did you want to say something about that, Martin, did you have something to say?
The core of this whole sovereign citizen thing, it actually, they're not completely isolated. You've got all the freedom marches and everything like we want freedom, freedom, freedom. What they fail to realise is, and I always use the analogy, if there were only 5 people in Queensland, I could pretty much do what I like. But as there become more and more people, you benefit from the community, but you also have to cede some of your freedom for the good of the community. And I maintain it's like 2 balloons. As you press them together, they deform, they meet. So your freedom only goes as far as it impinges on other people's freedom. And that's what people fail to realise. They don't fail to, they won't realise. It's a willful ignorance that is... It is scary because that feeling of I should be able to do whatever I like is probably I think it's always a preliminary step in someone actually consciously taking the freedom of others. And I remember saying to a bloke who came to me telling me that all laws were invalid, and he was one of these nutters. And I literally said to him, my reply was, well, give me your wallet. And he said, what? I said, give me your wallet. He said, what do you want that for? I said, I'm going to take it. I'm bigger than you. I'm stronger than you. The laws are invalid by your own statement. Therefore, I want your wallet. All of a sudden, the argument changed. And that's all I've got to say about it. So, Yeah, he just completely went to bits, can't have the wallet and everything like that. And as I said, well, all of a sudden you want the law to protect you from someone that's bigger and nastier. So
that's an interesting notion, isn't it? How, here we are in this sort of war, I suppose, this battle. What sort of arguments are going to get us over the line? What sort of arguments actually can worm their way into people's limbic systems? Because, that's a really, really excellent example, because that suddenly it's become an emotional thing for him as opposed to just battling on facts, right? So that's interesting, is how do we do it? How do we actually get into people, the emotional part of people's brains, to try and affect change? Because we are up against it, are we not? What do you think, Dane?
Persuasion. It's all about persuasion.
And how do you persuade?
Well, you've got to ask questions. You never tell them. If I tell you you're wrong, you dig your heels in, especially
Correct.
if you're a man, right? We very good at sticking our heels in and saying, no, I'm right and you're wrong. The information you're giving me, it doesn't matter how good it is. I'm not happy to have it. Persuasion always has to come in, and the way you persuade people is you ask them questions. You allow them to, for instance, okay, if the vaccine was no good, how did all of the doctors say that the vaccine was good? You know what I mean? So they've either got to, say that, well, they're all on the take, or they're all in a cabal together. So
well, they're the big shill. They're the big shill.
So is there millions, what, how many doctors in the world? 100 million? I don't know. Whatever. They're all on the same level, but the few that you have chosen to bring to forefront who says that it's not right, but everyone else is wrong. It's the same as climate science. Climate science is
settled.
It's settled. It's not an argument anymore. It's the same as renewable energy. Renewable energy, it's clean, it's cheap. That's what it is. It doesn't matter how you put it. It's stable. They say, well, it's unstable. So last time I checked, the sun comes up at about 6 o'clock in the morning and goes down at 6 o'clock at night. It sounds pretty reliable to me.
Yeah.
But you've got to ask them questions, and you can't push your message onto them. The question will allow them to examine their own thought process and hopefully lead them to the conclusion that maybe I'm wrong. And at the end of the day, you will not pull everyone across the line.
No, we're not going to pull them across the line.
You need the centre right and the centre left to come back to the centre, sensible centre.
Back to what that bit of discourse that Martin had, because I'm really interested in the granularity of that. Because you sort of asked, because clearly that sort of broke it apart, didn't it, in a way?
Well, it did, but I want to change tack a little bit. So the first thing, like I'm also a counsellor, local counsellor, and I used this as an argument on one of the things. We're talking about a possible new industry, and I said, you've got to be aware of, the fable told by Aesop. The dog crossing the log on the stream, looks down, he's got meat in its mouth, looks down, sees the reflection, wants both the pieces of meat, grabs for that other one and loses the meat he's got.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very great fable in that what we, the four of us and everyone else needs to do is, first of all, not worry too much about these people that are already gone. They are our secondary target. The first target is to shore up what we've got. There are some good people there that don't have a voice. They're feeling nervous. I had a day yesterday when you start to think, oh, my God, all this stuff against me, and I regard myself as strong. So we need to give the good people the knowledge that there are people out the front holding the banner up and going forward. That's our first step. So sometimes, and that's why I absolutely excoriate some of these individuals.
Yeah.
It's not to change them, it's to let my people know that someone is fighting for them.
I agree. And I know Snarky and I talk a lot about the fact that we call, the anti-vaxxers or the entire cohort cookers. And then I've had some, because I'm part of the Australian Skeptics movement, and the Australian Skeptics very much sit in the place where they try and do not exclude, try and include, and try and, to Dane's point, try and sort of find some commonality so the person can, deep dive into their own ethics and then maybe come up with an answer that is sort of more rational. So I think, I've completely lost my point. What was I fucking saying there? Sorry, Harry.
And in my reply to you're talking about that including and whatever. Yeah. Why can't we do both? Why can't we burn some people at the stake and, as an example to our people, and then go on to include, like you said earlier, that we tend to be very black and white, it's right or it's wrong. So, and I thought the fluoride thing, and I heard doctors and dentists and that saying, by nature we're non-confrontational. And yet our opposition is they're hyper-confrontational.
Extremely.
So we need to be both. We are supposedly, apparently, the higher intellect people, there's a study came out, said they lean more to more social,
the
left wing, if you want to call it, view, a libertarian view. A liberal view, not libertarian, for God's sake.
Not libertarian.
Well, if we are that, if we want to, and I'm not left wing, but if we want to be seen as the smart ones, why can't we do both? Why don't we do both? We've got to be self-critical as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and I think, because Snarky, we do talk about, we do call them cookers, and we've got some cookers that we engage with that we are quite virulent, I think, in our opposition and really quite strong. And other ones, and then you've got sorry, Snarks. Go, you go. No, you go.
Cut. No, I think as well, I know it's a very broad sweep term and it is, people do find it derogatory, but it's for me, there's almost different tiers and who we're trying to appeal to, as referenced previously or earlier. It's really just the people who are not sure, people on the fence.
Correct.
It's to and touched on previously. It's for the new mum at 3 o'clock in the morning nursing a baby. Who's,
that was awesome that she sent.
It was
that
sweet, but it was it's that sort of people have just vindicated what it is that we do. And when, I get all the time people saying, what's the point on posting this? People who are so far down that rabbit hole aren't going to read it. They're not going to be able to read it. I'm sure they could if they wanted to, but they won't. And on balance, they probably won't, but it's not for them. They're not the audience. I think who we scorn, though, are the people who should know better. So the qualified people who claim to be qualified or can present that they're qualified, but then are still selling snake oil. That for me is like that's one of the worst human beings, really. Yeah. And I do target a few, people who have been, deregistered and whatnot. I think you should actually know better. It's one thing. I give the benefit of the doubt. It's one thing for someone to fall down that rabbit hole just due to various factors and environments that they're in, and genuinely feel, have made an error. But it's a whole other level of someone who should know better, but then they're pushing
and who's
this
just
nonsense.
Grifting, right? It's
and
the
they're putting lives at risk just to sell their bullshit.
And they do
supplement at 400% markup.
I really do agree with what you've just said there, and I think it's really important that there's people that have lost that you will never bring back, and they're the ones that can be scorned. Like Miss Smith, I think she's now she's grifting on like one
Pauline Hanson.
Correct. Who votes for the Liberal Party 90% of the time? Who imposed the vaccine mandates? Who imposed the lockdowns? Like it's literally, it doesn't make sense if you analyze that. So at the end of the day, asking her supporters thoughtful questions, and that is the way to make them look at her in a way that maybe doesn't bring her into this authoritative light that they some reason hold her in.
So I just want to
she jumped in.
Can I just describe, because people won't know who we're talking about. We're talking about Monica Smith, who was a virulent and deeply annoying anti-vaxxer. And then what's happened to the anti-vax movement broadly is that it's going down a bit now because of America. But anyway, anti-vaxxers, the vaccination rates in Australia are pretty good, and the anti-vaxxers lost a platform, so they've had to go somewhere. So now they've sort of moved on to just being sort of disgusting and racist.
The freedom mob.
Well,
the freedom mob. The
thing,
freedom mob.
the credulous thing with Monica Smith, though, is she is vaccinated. She needed the vaccine to get a US visa and to get a media pass. So she is vaccinated. She knows what she's doing. That for me makes it worse.
Liar.
And I agree. And because she knows, it's the same as if I look at Barnaby Joyce. Like Barnaby Joyce knows that renewable energy is cheaper. He knows it brings jobs. He was up there in 2017, I think, turning over the first sod of soil on a brand new wind farm. And it was great. It was going to bring jobs and it was going to bring power prices down. And all of a sudden, it's like, hang on, the Labor Party has adopted our policies. There's a wedge here. We can go against it. And they drove that wedge when he knows better. He knows better. Pauline Hanson, she knows better. Monica Smith, she knows better. The people who follow them generally don't. So I think it's really important that we allow some forgiveness to those people and try and allow them to see that there is a home here with us. And then if they do decide to come here, we have to let it go. We have to be the bigger people because they've had to be the bigger person. It's not about scorning people all the time. It's about scorning the right people.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, Martin. What were you going to say, Marty?
Look, there's 2 points. One steps back a bit. When we talk about Pauline Hanson and all that, like I was talking about the freedom mob, I sort of call them the flag drapers because patriotism to them is grabbing the flag and doing whatever with it.
Chinese-made flag.
They criticise flag burners. But if you look at flag protocol, they themselves are just as guilty of treating the flag with disrespect, like Pauline Hanson having it as a picnic blanket and walking over it, all of that sort of thing. So they're just so, and that bugs me. And I've had people talking
Selective
about
outrage.
But the other thing I was going to say, and it's become even more apparent to me in this conversation we've had, the reason I was so enthusiastic about the collaboration between Fracks and Gherks is because we have a similar view, but we come at it from completely different perspectives.
You do.
And every so often, like, it makes me sit back and think. And that's why I'll be blunt, I have a really good feeling deep down, and it's not because I ate a whole roast chicken or anything like that. It's because with chips. No, it's because all of a sudden I know that there are 2 people there that if I go out on a limb and that limb is not good, they're willing to say, Marty, pull yourself back. You're gonna fall and fall hard. Yep. And that is valuable to me.
But also, it shows people how you can come back, which is really important.
That's right.
Like I was wrong once as well, right? Ask my wife.
I've never been wrong.
What I say, horribly.
You just ask my wife; she'll tell you. I'm right 99% of the time.
Yeah,
it's the 1%.
You just ask David. I've never been wrong in our entire marriage, which is astonishing, right? And yet true.
Absolutely. I've been wrong, and I 10 years ago I would have probably been described as, well, only once, I'll admit to, but I would be, looking back now, and I'd probably insufferable to some people that I'd call, but I was pretty, red pilled, as they're called. I was pretty red pilled on the whole climate situation, but we learn, and and it just, but I was closed off to actual expertise. I was listening too much to, shock jock sort of opinions and things. But so I'm fully sympathetic. I think people can come around as well.
I think sympathetic's the word there. You've got to be sympathetic, and you have to leave the door open, and then you cannot rub people's face in it. You have to just accept they've come across, and then at the end of the day, someone has to be the bigger person. And generally,
I'd never mock somebody if their opinion changed. And I've said this actually in various other projects I've been in with some prominent anti-vax people. If ever they just revert to being normies and just getting on with their lives and stuff, I'd never mock them for that. And I'd never actually bring up, you used to think this. We're all entitled to change our opinions as we're shown new information. And
it's a hard thing to do, isn't it? Because our identity is very, very tied up with this notion of our opinions. We're very, very closely aligned with it. So if somebody, if your identity is questioned, it can make us feel really, really unstable. I think, like, who am I if I've always thought this and now I have to think that? So hats off to anybody who actually moves off a position, because it's very, very hard. Yes?
And noble.
I'll ask you a question, though. Like, how many of us, of the four of us here, have time for even more battles than what we're fighting? And I think I'm going to jump in and say no, because that's the answer I want. So when someone does come over, do we turn and drive the knife in to make sure they're properly dead? Or do we leave them behind and continue, like, fighting ahead, which is what we need to do?
I don't understand the question. Can you go back to the beginning of that again? What do you mean?
Well, what I'm saying is we're all fighting battles, aren't we? Like, we're us four against the misinformation by anti-vaxxers, by
climate, everything.
People with political views, the freedom fighters, all of that. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, for myself, my time is taken up with that. So if someone was to come over and say, no, you're right, why waste time then in further denigrating them?
Yeah.
That frees up a bit more time for me to continue on the battle, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's once you've won, you've won. You can't win more. You just you keep moving on. And it is actually in your own self-interest, to
the best relationship advice I ever got, and I now apply that to my entire life. When you're wrong, admit it. When you're right, you shut the F up. You'd let that person apologize, accept it, shut up, move on.
Yeah.
It is the best advice I've ever had, and I live by it now, and I live by it when I'm...
Hard to do, though? Do you find that hard to do? Like, really and truly, is that difficult?
Absolutely, it's difficult.
Yes, I know.
It's
right?
But you can't be intellectually lazy. You have to try and understand on a deeper level what's happened to them. Their mortgages are rising. They can't 100%. Buy kids for their shoes. They can't put fuel in their car. There are so many reasons to be angry, and there's so many that the easiest scapegoat is generally the government or somebody else instead of looking in. So when they've come out of that for one reason or the other, you've got to be the bigger person. And that's why I love Marty's comment section. I love it when Marty just rips someone to shred who's gone too far. And I'm like, I'm living my best life through Marty Bella.
The Social Democrats copped a ballot the other day, didn't they? Sorry.
Sorry, mate. I was going to say, a lot of times what people see when I rip someone to shreds is me just ripping someone to shreds. But a lot of the time, predominantly, those people have been complete dicks on other posts, and I keep a list of the dicks, and I just get to the point and think, right, mate, now it's your turn. So they do get their chance.
It's like a queue. They're in the queue,
unless,
right?
Of course, if someone is just an absolute bigoted pig, and their comment is just, completely. Well, look, I'm of ethnic descent. I've got lots of ethnic friends. I had an Indian guy that owned a service station crying in speaking to me because of the way he's been treated. I have 3 daughters and a son. I call them my savage daughters, and they are savage. I've got, 9 granddaughters and 4 grandsons. So would I not want to see the best for those girls? And I don't mean the best for girls. I mean the best for people.
Yep.
And heaven help me if I went, the granddaughters are still a bit too young, but heaven help me if I went against my daughters, because they are strong, not strong women. I don't like that term. They are strong people.
Yep.
And
we can keep gender out of it, right?
I expect better of my people, and my people expect better of me.
Yep.
And
it's a nice
that's
frame
what
up.
makes it work for me.
Yep. What do you think, Snarks?
No, I agree. As a father of daughters, I care about the world they're going to grow up in and have to coexist with, and wholeheartedly agree with Bella on that. So I'm really glad to be working and connected with everybody here. It's really good.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
It's an exciting thing, and I'm deeply grateful because I know, as I said at the beginning, that you all have very, very busy lives, and devoting the time that you do to fighting disinformation is awesome and amazing.
Do you,
Sorry?
It's funny when Gerk's followed on from me from talks about being a father of daughters.
It reminded you of Scott Morrison? No. Sorry.
Gerks and I have a mutual friend called Brent. Now, I don't know whether you know, are you aware of my nail polish challenge, Annie?
I am.
Right. So the idea was I got sick of saying...
The listeners aren't.
Right.
So I'll just, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at Martin, who is your, he's a guy, he's a strong sort of masculine looking guy. He's looking at me from the Zoom and he has nail polish on. So tell me about that.
Well, so I've never been backward in letting the granddaughters and the daughters, do my nails. One of the things I love is getting face painted.
Yeah.
Because I've got a lot of space, you might have noticed. It takes a lot more paint for some.
Yeah.
But ultimately the story was, because people saw my views as lefty, and I'm not a lefty, as I keep saying, I'm a centrist, and if anything, slightly to the right. So conservative with a conscience.
Yeah.
But I was then being criticised as not being a man. You're not a real man, you're not this and that. And that annoys me. So I did a thing wearing my best, I love colour, so my best Hawaiian shirt, and talked about how we were going to prove what big, strong, manly men, and I feminised my voice, if you want to, because I can sashay with the best of them.
Sure.
A bit of a thespian as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did that, and the challenge was go and get your nails painted.
Yeah.
Post the photos, and we'll pick, and I had a pink work shirt that's because I bought it as a work shirt, but it was too small, pre-creased, and I was going to give that as a prize.
So many chickens.
So we had that thing, and most blokes left their nail polish on when they went to work and that and whatever. But the first guy I drew out of the competitors was my best mate, and I couldn't give it to him. The second one was a young fellow called Brent. Now, Brent, the reason he's doing what he's doing is because he's got a 5-year-old daughter. He's got 4 blokes that work under him as they're Indians. He doesn't want his daughter to grow up in a world of hate. This is what he said, and he's got something coming down the pipeline which will help him with.
We'll have to have him on, yeah, for sure.
Yes, definitely. And what is interesting is that Brent got on, showed we did a clip, showed his nails, and then he said to me, and I get a bit full when I say this, he said, I love the shirt, I want the shirt, but pass it on to Mark. Now, Mark is a guy that has been painting one nail with his daughter's nail polish ever since he lost her in 2014.
Oh.
So, Brent, we sent the shirt to Mark. Mark is as happy as Larry, and coincidentally, this is how small circles are. Mark's partner is actually a girl I met at Terrigal back in the 90s. And sort of knew her. She was running a floral business back then. But, yeah, so the upshot of the whole thing was, what's a man? Well, a man is anything that is needed at the time that it is needed. It's not a matter of posturing, posing or anything like that. And I've got to say, every one of those blokes that took on that challenge, they're real men because they don't care what other men think.
100%. Yeah,
so,
100%. We've got to move
Brent's
away
a champion.
Yep. So what I'm going to do is wind this up because we've been, as I thought, we've got plenty to talk about. And I think that we're going to have more to talk about. And I'd like to ask you if you would come back.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Martin?
I'd love to.
Only if you're nice to me.
Yeah, but I may not be. There's every chance I won't be.
That's not the way it works, mate.
Is that a dare?
Yeah, there's no guarantee on that at all. I get nastier, and as you get to know me more, I get nastier and nastier, right? So,
well, that's why I brought back up this time, because I thought.
Yes, Snarky's well sick of me having a go at him. So this has been great. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful new friendship where we are going to join hands on the battlefield and find the best way that we can to defeat the enemy that is disinformation. So, on that note, thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you very much, Dane.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Snarks.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for tuning in, smart women. I hope you found that an instructive hour of your time. Everybody that is out there, wherever you are in the world, I'm sure there are times when you look around you and go, man, don't speak to that person like that, or don't put that online. You all have a voice. And it's very, very important that we access that voice and put it out into the sphere, because it's only that that's going to stop this tsunami of disinformation that is actually endangering us. So, to all the smart women out there, and to the men that tune in, thank you so much for tuning in. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe, stay well, keep your critical thinking hats on. See you later. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Why Smart Women with me, Annie McCubbin. I hope today's episode has ignited your curiosity and left you feeling inspired by my anti-motivational style. Join me next time as we continue to unravel the fascinating layers of our brains and develop ways to sort out the fact from the fiction and the over 6,000 thoughts we have in the course of every day. Remember, intelligence isn't enough. You can be as smart as paint, but it's not just about what you know, it's about how you think. And in all this talk of whether or not you can trust your gut, if you ever feel unsafe, whether it's in the street, at work, in a car park, in a bar, or in your own home, please, please respect that gut feeling. Staying safe needs to be our primary objective. We can build better lives, but we have to stay safe to do that. And don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast and share it with your fellow smart women and allies. Together, we're hopefully reshaping the narrative around women and making better decisions. So until next time, stay sharp, stay savvy, and keep your critical thinking hat shiny. This is Annie McCubbin signing off from Why Smart Women. See you later. This episode was produced by Harrison Hess. It was executive produced and written by me, Annie McCubbin.